I am Elizabeth, 42 years old, married and a stepmother, but I think what I am about to share has changed me in a way I have never been. This morning, I woke up with an excitement I hadn't felt in a long time. I couldn't deny the effect of time anymore. Every morning at breakfast, my stepson, who lived in the same house with me, would look at me with his confident look and smile. I would notice that deep look in his eyes. He was my husband's son, but it was getting harder and harder to ignore these feelings inside me. One evening, I was alone while my husband was on a business trip. I was preparing dinner. My stepson walked into the kitchen and touched my shoulder lightly. "You look a little stressed," he said. His voice was soft but expressive. He looked into my eyes. Every word echoed in my heart. In that moment, I realized how much I was drawn to him and that I couldn't escape these feelings. That night, the distance between us completely disappeared. It was wrong, but I surrendered myself to these feelings. When our hands touched my skin, a storm erupted inside me. I felt again a passion I hadn't felt for years. I was completely mesmerized by his youth and energy, but it also brought with it a great uneasiness. These confusing feelings for my stepson made me question whether it was love or a passing passion. I thought about what would happen if my husband found out. The guilt was eating me up, but this forbidden relationship was drawing me in more and more every day. One night, my husband came home early from work and went straight to sleep. My heart was pounding. Excitement filled me as I walked into my stepson's room. He looked surprised to see me, but that look quickly turned into a familiar spark. When I entered the room, his hands reached for me. In the silence, I felt his breath on my neck, and my desire grew stronger. Quietly but intensely, we moved closer to each other. My husband was fast asleep just a few walls away. What happened that night left an indelible mark on both of our minds. It was now a secret, but it would remain a great weight in our lives. In the morning, as the sunlight filtered through the curtains and illuminated the room, I lay quietly in my bed, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, crushed under the weight of the previous night's events. Confusion, guilt, and fear swirled around me like a storm. But in the midst of all these emotions, I was strangely surprised by the peace I felt. This feeling could not be true. The moment I shared with my stepson haunted me. There was a deep attraction inside me. I couldn't deny it. But now, in the cold emptiness of the bed, I was faced with the harsh reality. My husband was in the next room. This secret was a bombshell that would shake the foundation of everything between us. I took a deep breath and got out of bed. When my feet touched the cold floor, I shuddered as if I had touched the icy conscience inside me. I looked at myself in the mirror. The lines on my face, the tiredness and redness in my eyes. I didn't recognize myself. Was this woman me? How had I lost control of my life so much? I was making coffee in the kitchen when I was suddenly startled by a voice behind me. "Did you sleep?" my stepson said. The calmness in his voice almost made the heaviness of the night disappear. I didn't dare turn to look at him. "I couldn't sleep," I mumbled, staring into the coffee cup. The silence between us was heavy. The impact of that night's events hung over both of us. "Elizabeth," he whispered. The way he said my name broke something inside me. Then she took a deep breath and continued. "It must remain a secret. No one must know." That sentence triggered something inside me. I agreed with him, but carrying this secret was not going to be that easy. I nodded, my eyes filled with tears. "I know," I said quietly, but I could literally feel the weight of those words. During breakfast, my husband came into the kitchen. "Good morning," he said cheerfully. The guilt was suffocating me as I looked at the peaceful expression on his face. But on the outside, I had to pretend that nothing had happened. Days passed, but the secret made our relationship even more complicated. Every time we locked eyes, that night came alive again. But the secret also seemed to bind us together even more. The lure of the forbidden made it impossible for me to control my emotions. One day, my husband told me he had another business trip. This time I was worried I couldn't make the same mistake again. I had to resist this pull inside me, but it was a battle between my heart and my mind. That night we were alone again, and when I felt my stepson's gaze on me, my heart began to race. "Elizabeth, we can't go on like this," he said, but the spark in his eyes was still there. "You're right," I said. "This has to stop." But even as I said those words, I didn't know if I was really ready for it to end. That night, my stepson's words echoed in my head. "We can't go on like this." He was right. We couldn't go on, but this attraction, it seemed just as impossible to break away from this passion. It was like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. If I slipped, I would fall, but it was just as hard to turn back. The day after my husband left for a business trip, there was an early morning knock on the door. When I opened the door, I was surprised by the face I saw, my mother-in-law. We hadn't seen each other for a long time, so her sudden appearance at the door made me both happy and uneasy. Even though I tried to act normal, she seemed to sense that something was wrong with me. "Elizabeth, are you okay? You look so pale," he said worriedly. "I'm just a little tired," I replied, trying to smile, but I could tell by the look in his eyes that this answer did not satisfy him. We sat at the breakfast table, drinking coffee and chatting, but one thought kept running through my head. What if he realized something? What if this secret somehow got out? After my mother-in-law left, I sat in silence for a while, thinking about what had happened, what I had been through, the choices I had made. How could I get myself out of this mess? In the evening, my stepson came home. I tried to keep my distance from him, but his gaze drew me like a magnet. "Elizabeth, I need to talk to you," he said seriously. I felt a shiver run through me. "What is it?" I asked, trying not to let my voice tremble. "I've been thinking about that night," she said, and paused. It was as if he was trying to figure out how to phrase what he wanted to say. "We can't escape these feelings, but we have to control them. We have to think about my father." Those words shook something inside me. My husband's face, my love and devotion to him, came to the forefront of my mind for a moment. "You're right," I said, my eyes welling up. "This is our fault, and we can't make others pay for it." But this speech did not calm the storm inside me. That night, I tossed and turned in bed for a long time without sleep, a constant battle in my mind. Love, passion, or moral responsibility. The next day, my husband returned home. When he hugged me with exhaustion on his face, I felt a tightening in my heart. Everything about him reminded me of the deep love I once felt. But I didn't know where that love was now. I knew I had to talk to my husband, but I couldn't imagine what that conversation would be like. Telling him the truth would mean shattering our lives. But living with this burden was exhausting me. I deliberately avoided being alone with my stepson after dinner, but every time our gazes met, there was so much left unsaid. "Elizabeth," she said in a whisper as my husband watched TV in the living room, "I can't go on living like this. Either we find a clear solution or—" He paused. "Or we finish this." I looked into his eyes, took a deep breath. "We have to end it," I said with determination. But as I said the words, a corner of my heart twisted with pain.